Potentially the craziest One Piece panel I have ever seen just dropped. And today we're going to be talking about the insane implications that this panel has on One Piece. Please, 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 if you have not read chapter 1155, click off of this video. Massive, massive, massive spoilers are going to be in this video. You may have guessed it already, but I am talking about this sequence of panels where Rox is facing off with Emu, a character that nobody in the story has seen since their introduction almost 300 chapters ago. This is why I love One Piece, because just one sequence of panels brings up so many questions and also so many answers, and that's exactly what we're going to be discussing in this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Leave a comment what you feel about this whole Rox and Emu relationship. It is absolutely insane. And if you want to keep up with Elbaf analysis as weekly chapters drop, I make a video every week about the new chapter. So let's just start with something simple first. Let's just talk about the fact that Rox got into this garden room when no other character has been able to do this in the history of One Piece. Immediately, the first thing that comes to my mind when I realize that this has never been done before is the implications for Rox's strength. Yes, the fact that this room and Emu's existence is secret also probably has to do with the fact that it's never been done before, but because it is one of the most heavily guarded secrets in the entire One Piece world, you definitely need to be a certain level of strength to achieve this accomplishment. And we already know Rox took down an admiral and kidnapped 5 kings on his way to this room, but to be able to get past potentially Holy Knights and also Emu's maybe royal guard to get into this room is something that I feel like only Rox would be able to do, so the stocks for Rox's strength is skyrocketing right now. But to me, what's more interesting than the implications on his strength is the implications of his intelligence. We sort of jumped into this Herald backstory, which is now kind of a Rox backstory, halfway through Rox's life. This sequence of panels really makes me wonder, how did he gain access to the Reverie? Is he a king of some sort? Did he sneak all the way to the top of the Red Line? Has this been his goal the entire time, or did he just spontaneously try and get into the throne room? These are some of the questions that I think everyone wants answered, but unfortunately I don't think we're going to get those answers now because it seems like we're pushing forward in the Rox flashback rather than learning more about his past. But I do think there's something in this sequence of panels that does give hints of these answers of why he was at the Reverie in the first place and why he maybe has beef with Emu or wants to become the king of the world. Before we get to that though, let's talk about what this means for Blackbeard. For the longest time, all One Piece fans would tell you that the final villain is probably going to be Emu, because Luffy liberating the world is the climax of One Piece and it's going to end the story. But this chapter just adds a whole new level of potential motivations to Blackbeard, giving credence to the pretty now popular theory that Blackbeard is the one who will fight Emu and become the final villain for Luffy instead. Now, I'm not too sure how I feel about this yet, because I feel like the entire build-up of One Piece has been building to the liberation of the world, the toppling of the world government, the world that Luffy's going to make free as the sun god Nika, and for Blackbeard to sort of come after that giant cathartic moment would sort of be muddying the water of that achievement for Luffy. So I'm curious about how Oda's going to tackle the order of things, if he will make Blackbeard the final villain, or if Blackbeard will come to represent exactly what Emu represents and Luffy will defeat Blackbeard in that cathartic moment we're all waiting for. There's a lot of questions I have here, but just the fact that Rox and Emu have an interaction here, and Rox is the father of Blackbeard like we learned last chapter, there's a whole new batch of ingredients to cook up that theory that Blackbeard is actually the final villain. I no longer think it's completely out of the question. But enough about random implications. Let's talk about perhaps the most interesting dialogue drop this entire chapter, the Davy Jonesian pirate. In Rox's conversation with Emu, he claims to be a Davy Jonesian pirate. This is extremely interesting, primarily for the reason that we have no idea what this means. Is Davy Jonesian a lifestyle, an ideology, a race, a clan, a place, an island? We genuinely have no idea what this could potentially mean, but I do think there's a few little inklings of information that can help us guess what it is from the rest of the chapter. And the first is that Rox used Davy back fights to gather his entire crew. I absolutely love this callback to Long Reign Longland. I've been saying forever that Davy back fights were going to come back into the story in a major way. And I think it also gives a lot of depth to the fact that not a lot of Rox's crewmates listened to him. They were sort of a mismatched pirate crew because they didn't come together organically like the Straw Hats or maybe the future Whitebeard pirates. Instead, they were sort of just strung together through arguments, which is exactly why their crew probably fell apart at God Valley, which we'll get to later in this video. But more importantly, the fact that Davy back fights were what Rox used to gather his crew, and the fact that he claimed to be a Davy Jonesian pirate means there's some sort of connection between these two things. What I'm getting at here is that when we're trying to figure out what Davy Jonesian means, the fact that there is some sort of culture or ritual in Davy back fights related to Davy Jonesian makes me feel like it's either a race or a clan of people. Whatever this race or clan of people is, it is likely where Davy back fights originated, it is likely where Rox is from, and it's exactly why he defaulted to using Davy back fights to gather up his entire crew. But we can even take this a step further. If instead of looking at Davy Jonesian as something related to Davy back fights and trying to determine if it's a race or a clan, we look at just the fact that Rox himself is choosing to tell Emu this, it becomes a whole new level of interesting. Why in his limited dialogue with the King of the World would Rox choose to out himself as this Davy Jonesian pirate? Well, I think there's something about Davy Jonesian that nobody's talking about. It starts with D. This could be an insane stretch, but if Rox knew that there was a King of the World, he knew that Emu existed when no one else did, who's to say that Rox didn't also know what the Will of D was, and that someone who possesses the Will of D was supposed to go topple the hierarchy of the world and liberate the world? What I'm saying is, Rox probably knew everything. He knew of Emu's existence, he knew about the Ancient Kingdom, he knew about the Will of D, so that when he got to Emu's little garden area here, the first thing he told Emu was, I'm a Davy Jonesian pirate, aka, I'm from the Will of D, I'm destined to come and take you down. Now, I know this would be crazy if Oda just dropped what the Will of D was randomly in this random text box without, like, any exposition about it being the Will of D. I just think there's some kind of connection here where in Rox's tiny window where he was able to talk to the King of the World, he chose to say, I'm a Davy Jonesian pirate, right? There's only that line of dialogue in this conversation if there's some sort of connection with Davy Jonesian and Emu. There is some string of connection here that we're missing. Now, let me just step off of the drugs for a second and be a little bit more realistic. If this isn't the case, I do think there is a different implication that this whole Davy Jonesian thing can have. And that is, if is a clan or race of people like I mentioned previously, could this be the reason why Blackbeard is able to possess 2 devil fruits? Not only when Blackbeard possesses his second devil fruit for the first time do people say his body is weird, but also Saturn in Egghead, when talking to the Blackbeard pirates, says that he knows Blackbeard's lineage is a little bit strange, which allows him to be a giant threat. So is it possible that this Davy Jonesian clan or race is what Blackbeard is the reason why he's able to possess 2 devil fruits? It's just something to think about. I think personally I'm gonna side with the whole Will of D theory because I think it's really cool. However, it is possible that this is just a race of people that we haven't heard of yet, maybe even a faction of the Ancient Kingdom, and it is the reason why Blackbeard's body is so strange. Now getting to the end of this sequence of panels, I want to talk about how Rox did not act here. We get a line of dialogue saying that Rox realized there was nothing more he can do and he retreated. Why did Rox retreat at the final step of his operation? The first and most obvious answer that people are leaning to here is that Emu is just so incredibly powerful that Rox realized he couldn't do it all on his own, and maybe that's why he went to go gather crewmates through a Davy back fight, including trying to recruit Harold, the King of Elbaf, because he just simply knew he couldn't defeat Emu on his own. This is the most baseline interpretation of this text. It's very possible considering Emu is the all-powerful being of this world, as has been established previously with the destruction of literal islands, but let's talk about some other reasons why Rox could have potentially retreated here. The next thing on the list of why Rox could have retreated is that maybe he just found out about the immortality in this encounter. Maybe Rox shot Emu, which is why he's holding a gun in this panel. Emu completely regenerated, and Rox realized he has no idea how to counter immortality itself, so he decided to retreat. I think this could fit really nicely into the Elbaf storyline if we see in Rock's backstory him figuring out how to counter immortality, because then it provides sort of a segue to the Straw Hats learning how to deal with the immortality, because they have to, because that's exactly what's happening on the backside of this flashback right now. I know it's easy to forget when we're getting all this crazy reveals in this flashback, but once we jump back to the present, Elbaf is under attack by Emu and the God's Knights, who are immortal, so we have to learn how to damage them before the arc ends, and if Rox was learning how to figure that out during his flashback, it's just a very nicely fit puzzle piece for Elbaf. Or another alternative option is that it had something to do with this mysterious girl who's a side Emu in this panel. Did Rox retreat because of this person alone, or just the fact that there could have been other God's Knights immediately to Emu's aid if he tried to attack? I think it's something valuable to discuss here because Oda wouldn't just include this random lady, who I think is probably Gunko or someone from Gunko's family in this panel, but it is definitely just something to think about. Maybe Rox retreated because he would have been swarmed by Emu's God's Knights immediately if he attacked. And I just want to throw in there, I have never been more sure in my entire life after this sequence of panels that Emu, or Emu possessing somebody similar to what's happening on Elbaf, was present at God Valley. There is absolutely no way that Rox, Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, all of these people were on God Valley, and the island ended up getting erased without the presence of Emu on this island. And I think this is exactly why Oda's withholding this flashback from us for such a long time. It is probably going to be the grand reveal of Emu and what they are fully capable of, but I totally think it's fitting that Rox potentially didn't go out fighting Garp and Roger. I know they definitely clashed at the very least, because if Oda robbed us of that fight, people would go crazy. I would be pretty upset. But I think it's definitely possible that Emu dealt the final blow to Rox at God Valley, and whenever we get to see that flashback, it will be the entire reveal of the series' potential final villain. And very lastly, this has nothing to do with the sequence of panels that this entire video has been about, but I just want to build upon something that I said in the last video. Rox's bounty poster looks identical to Buggy's. Last video I mentioned about how Roger could have got Buggy onto his crew in the same way he got Shanks onto his crew. He found a treasure chest with a kid in it, and instead of it being Figureland Garling's kid in Shanks, there was another child, and it was Rox's child in Buggy. The only evidence I had for this theory was the fact that they look pretty similar, but now we see their bounty posters are extremely similar, and I've even seen some colorings of people making Rox's hair blue and black, the colors of Blackbeard and Buggy. I just want to keep mentioning this theory every time new evidence comes out, as if I'm following it like a news story, because I feel like I called it at its very beginning. I'm not the person who made it up or anything, but I think it's going to be a really funny theory to follow that could potentially come true in the future of the story. I could see this crazy grand reveal where Buggy just ends up finding out he's the son of the strongest pirate of all time. But that's all I have for this video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. If there's anything I missed or any other theories or implications you guys think this string of panels has for One Piece, let me know in the comments. I'm super interested what you guys think, because this is one of the craziest panels of all time. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.